Hello again. In my previous two films, the ones comparing the Mini 3 Pro and the Mini 2 still image quality, both in normal light and low light, I mentioned on several occasions using bracketed images in conjunction with Lightroom's Enhance and HDR merge tools. Now, if you're familiar with Lightroom, you probably know what these are already, but anyone that's new to it or not familiar with the software may be wondering what I'm referring to. So in this video, I'm going to go through a step-by-step process to demonstrate the use of these facilities within Lightroom. The video is quite long, but if the only bits that you're primarily interested in are the Enhance and HDR merge facilities, that's covered pretty much in the first 5 minutes or so. In the remainder of the film, I'll go through my usual editing techniques with raw files to get them the way I want them to look. I'll be using some of Lightroom's newest features, such as the new masking tool and how you can manipulate them. In addition to that, I'll be looking at the details tool for sharpening and noise reduction, tone curves and the HSL tools. The image I'm editing here isn't my best, but it does demonstrate some of the problems that are frequently encountered by drone operators when they're processing the images taken by their equipment. So this is how we turn 12 megapixel bracketed images from the Mini 2 or Mini 3 into 48 megapixel images. Okay, so here are 3 bracketed images. As you can see, they're all 4032 by 3024 in terms of dimensions and DNG files. What we need to do is Control or Command A to select all of them, and then right click, and about a third of the way down you can see the Enhance command here. So we're going to click that, and in the preview window here, if we click on it, you can see quite a lot of pixelization. That's without the enhancement at the same zoom level. Raw details should be checked up here anyway if you're using raw files, and you have the option to create stacks here. I don't normally bother with that though, so it's up to you if you want to do that. So now we go ahead and enhance the 3 images. This does take a little while, so we'll let it do its thing, but as we get to the slower elements of this process, what I'll do is speed the video up so we don't have to sit through it all. Okay, so it's essentially finished now. As you can see, we've now got 3 images which are 8064 by 6048 in terms of dimensions. They're still DNGs, but they've now got an enhanced label attached to them. These are the 3 images that we're going to be working with. So what we need to do now is right click with those 3 images selected, and again just before we see Enhance, about a third of the way down, we see Photo Merge, and we're going to merge them to an HDR. So we'll click that. This next part I'll speed up because it does take it quite a while to work through this process. Okay, so it's done its thing. We can see the preview here in front of us. In terms of the settings along the right hand side, we want auto align to be checked. That'll line the 3 images up so that they don't mismatch. Auto settings I tend to leave off, but you can see what it looks like. But as I say, I prefer to do the adjustments myself rather than leave it to the automatics. Deghost amount, it depends really how much movement there was in the original shots. For example, if there were to be, let me put auto settings back on again, if there were to be a car moving along this road here, it's entirely possible that you would want deghost on. This is a fairly static shot, so we'll probably get away with none. Let's switch it to high and let it build a preview, then we can show the overlay to see if it's actually made any changes anywhere. Okay, so let's check it, and as you can see, nowhere's lighting up, which essentially means that it's got no deghosting being applied, so we might as well just set it to none. And again, you can create a stack or not, whichever you prefer. Stack will just group the images together, but in this instance it's fairly easy to tell which one you're going to be working with because it will say Enhanced HDR. So we'll deselect that, and we'll deselect Auto Settings, and we'll merge them. Again, this is going to take a little while. Okay, so as you can see, we now have 4 images highlighted, the last of which, this one, if you look at the title, says Enhanced HDR. So this is the one that we're going to be working with. So we'll select it and then pop over into the develop module of Lightroom. Now the first thing that I normally do when I'm working with an image like this is check the horizons level. Obviously drones are quite prone, or some drones anyway, are quite prone to having a slightly tilted horizon, which can upset certain people. So we'll go into the crop overlay, and as you can see it presents us with a grid, but what I like to do is use the angle tool here, select that and get part of the horizon. You can just about see it here. Press and hold and drag it across. And it was very slightly off. Hardly enough to make any difference though. The next thing that I'll do, again within the crop and straighten window here, is select the aspect ratio that I want to work with. Now normally I'll use a 4/3 type aspect ratio, so in this case I'm going to select this one, but obviously it's your preference whether you want to go for a landscape effect or square, whatever is your preference. Let's go for that. What I'm going to do is drag the image down slightly to move the horizon onto the upper third. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it works usually. And just check all four corners to make sure, like here we might just be clipping outside the image, which will leave us a little bit of white space which we don't want, so I tend to just drag it in a fraction just to make sure. And when we're happy with it, we click done. So hopefully now we have a straightened image which we can begin to work with. Okay, so now what we're going to do is a little bit of masking to try and bring the exposure back into line with something we might want to look at. So I'll go over to the mask tool here, select it, and the first thing we're going to do is select a sky mask. What this is going to do is select the sky area. What you'll notice though is that it's missing a portion of it out at the bottom of the sky. Not so bad this side, but where the highlights are slightly blown out to where the sun actually is, part of the sky is actually not being captured by the mask, but we'll come back to that. So what I'm going to do now is invert this mask so that it actually affects the land area, the foreground and the midground, and then we can make adjustments to those. So just move that tool out of the way into the sky area. And the first thing I'm going to do here is adjust the exposure slightly, so we'll bring it up a touch. We're about half a stop to 2/3 of a stop, there or thereabouts. And then we're going to lift the shadows as well. What we want is a nice glow effect, but I'm also going to bring the blacks down to maintain some contrast in it. Obviously this will depend on your individual image. This is just how I would edit this particular image. You can play around with the highlights and the whites to see if it makes any difference that you prefer. You're really not making a lot of difference there. And the other tools that can be useful, although you need to use them quite gently, are the clarity and dehaze tools. Dehaze can be useful for creating a slightly misty effect or lightening. So if we bring that one back, you can see the effect. Obviously the more we pull it back it looks more misty, but it also brings the colour, the exposure up as well. So we'll find somewhere there's a reasonable compromise there. As I say, I don't like to use too much because it does affect the quality of the image. Clarity we'll leave as is, and we'll bring the blacks down again a touch to maintain some contrast. And there's this, to some extent it's working against the previous adjustment, but it can be quite a useful tool. Maybe bring a touch less on there. Okay, so I'm reasonably happy now with the forward and midground. So what we're going to do now is add another mask for the sky, but if I just create a sky mask as I did last time, so select sky, what you'll see is that it still misses out this area here, and it's quite a sharp delineation between the two areas. So in this instance that isn't going to work particularly well, so we'll delete that one. And what we'll do is create a linear gradient mask. So if you hold the shift key down and drag the left mouse button down, it'll create a linear gradient, and we can see the effect being applied as we come down, thereby catching the areas that the sky selection wasn't catching. So again, we'll move the mask tool out of the way, and again here I like to adjust the temperature, the tint, the exposure, and the highlights and clarity. So we'll start off with the colour, temperature and tint. Now if we bring that into the blue, I think it personally gives a slightly more pleasing effect than leaving it where it normally is. Obviously it depends on which camera you're using, and again if we move the tint towards the purple slightly, it'll bring the sky into what I think is probably a more natural colour. We can try bringing down the exposure, although I've got a sneaky suspicion that blown out sun might interfere with it if we're not careful. That's coming down reasonably well. And again we can play with the highlights and the whites. We don't want to go too far, otherwise you get a muddy area around the sun, which we don't want. So, as you can see in this area here, this is what I'm talking about. It's almost like a muddy halo around it. So we're going to bring that up till that disappears. And again we'll tweak the colour and tint to our liking. That's more like it. You can add a second gradient mask if you want to darken the top of the sky, which can be quite effective with clouds. I'll just show you the effect here. Again, if we select linear gradient and draw it down with shift held, it'll keep the horizon, or keep the mask level with the horizon hopefully. So we don't want to go into that sun area too much. And again, if I bring the exposure down, I bring it down more than I would normally, just to show you the effect. As you see, in fact that's quite nice about there. Okay, I'm reasonably happy with that. So you can also use the masking tool to mask any other areas that you don't like. I mean, I've got some lens flare here, which to be honest I'm not particularly keen on, but by the same token there's not a lot I can do with that, and this is just for the purposes of an example rather than an exhibition photograph. So I don't think we need to bother with that, but obviously it's up to you how far you want to go. If we switch the masks on and off, you'll see the difference with the original. So that was the original, and now with the masks applied. Okay, so we're reasonably happy with it, so what we're going to do now is click done down here, and then we're going to go into the detail tab here and adjust it for noise and sharpening. So to do this really you need to be up at 100%, so best thing to do is to pick an area where you think there might be some detail. That's these houses in this area, and zoom in until we get up to 100%. Just double check we've selected 100. Yes, we have. And to be fair, this the Mini 3 Pro actually does take quite a good image without much noise, and Lightroom's Enhance facility does a fairly good job of keeping the noise controlled, even when you've blown the image up to 48 megapixels, which is what we've effectively got here. And as you can see, Lightroom's already applied a default amount of sharpening, in this case 40. We can change that if we want to. You'll see it's not applied luminance noise reduction, but it has applied colour noise reduction. So So really I'm not going to do very much with this. I think I might adjust the details. So if you hold the option key down while you're adjusting it, it'll kind of highlight areas. I don't know if you can make that out on screen, but if I take it up to maximum, obviously you can maybe see it a bit more. Minimum is almost a completely flat grey screen. Default is 25. So if we take it up maybe to, or take it down, sorry, to 20, and see where that leaves us. Still looks reasonably good. Obviously the less sharpening you apply the better. Maybe bring it back to 25. I think Lightroom probably did a better job than me in that instance. What we're going to do now is apply some noise reduction. The best thing to do this is just shoot by eye at 100%. As I say, there's very little noise there anyway, so I'm going to take this up to 10 and see what it does. That seems to have removed what little noise there was there. Colour noise reduction, we could probably take that off altogether, but let's see what it does. Yeah, maybe add a touch. So bring it up to 10 as well. Yep, that looks pretty good. And detail levels I'll tend to increase slightly because, again, Lightroom tends to be a bit on the cautious side with that adjustment. So I'll bring those up to 55, both for colour and luminance noise. And to be honest, I'm fairly happy with that. It's retained a decent amount of sharpness when the map catches up. I'll take it down, and at that, obviously, at the screen zoom level, you're not really going to be able to see enough detail. But when it's zoomed into 100%, you can get the effect. So I think that's pretty much all we need to do with the detail tab. So next we'll move on to the colour adjustments and tone curves and see whether we can make any improvements there. Okay, so the next adjustment that we're going to do is the tone curve. Quite a powerful tool, and you can make a bit of a mess with it if you're not very careful. The traditional landscape setting for this, I suppose, would be an S-curve, which is exactly what I'm going to apply here. So if we move this here, if you look at the histogram, obviously the shadow detail is strongest, and we've got it dropping off as we move towards the highlights until we meet that slightly blown out area here. Nothing we do is going to affect that because that's already at maximum, although we can bring it down, and as you can see it doesn't really make much difference other than giving it a horrible grey effect, so we'll leave that alone. If we boost the highlights very slightly in the main part of it and drop the shadows down, it should add a little bit more contrast and a little bit more pop to the image. The other one that can be quite nice is the red adjustment here. So what I do here is where the histogram bisects the curve, I'll set a control point there so that we're not really adjusting anything to the right of that, and then we'll set an adjustment point here. And what I'll do with that is bring it up or down. Down should give it a slightly more purplish tinge, which can be quite effective as long as you don't go too mad with it. No, that's too much. Bring it up. And it just gives it a slightly warmer pinkish glow. So I'm happy with that. And then we're going to hue, saturation and luminance. I normally like to work with these in out of order sequence. So the first thing I normally work on is luminance. So obviously we've got quite a lot of sort of orangey green in the foreground. What I'm going to do is lighten the greens. If I take it up to max, you can see the full effect. But we'll not take it up to max, we'll take it up slightly from default, just to brighten those a touch. And likewise the oranges will bring up slightly. Okay, so that's that done. The next one I tend to play around with is hue. So Not too keen on this blue here, so I'm going to try and move that either more to the right to give it a more natural colour, which I think that looks a little bit more natural to my eyes. To be careful around these areas as well to make sure it's not affecting those. If we bring those down in the hue of the purple towards the blue end, it corrects it to match better with the rest of the sky. Aqua you can play around with. Sometimes it makes a difference. In this instance it makes none whatsoever. And we can also then look at the yellows, oranges and reds. I tend to bring these down towards the red end of the spectrum a little bit more, just to give that nice sunset effect that we have here, just to emphasise it. Again, with this adjustment, less is more really. So all that's left to do now really is just any final adjustments that you want to make to the image. I'm just going to apply a little bit of healing. See this little bit of lens flare here, just hit that. It's already selected somewhere which works quite well, so we'll leave that as it is. Again, there's a spot in the field here I'm not too keen on, so we'll just adjust that one. Too sure about that one, let's move it around a bit. And we'll click done there. And that's more or less it. Okay, so in terms of final touch-ups, I'm just going to go back into the masks and fiddle around with the colour of the sky a little bit more. See if I can get a slightly different shade, because I'm not 100% happy with that. So we'll try and warm it up to start with, see what that does. So changing the hue has brought about the kind of improvement that I was looking for. I think I might also reduce the topmost mask, the last of the two gradient masks that I applied. In fact, I think I might just remove that. I'm not entirely sure it's required. Let's take it off. That's definitely better. So mask 2, again we'll play around with that. Let's see what that does to us now. We don't want it too purple. That's quite nice there. So we'll leave that there. I'm happy with that now. We didn't need that that second gradient masking. The last thing I'm going to do, the corners down at the bottom in particular, and to some extent here, but obviously not in the top left. Could do with a little bit of lightening. It's got a little bit of vignetting apparent. So under effects, as you can see, if we take it all the way to the left, which is negative, it'll apply a horrible black vignette around it. And if we go to the right, that can sometimes be quite a nice effect if you've got a high key image. Not so much in this case, so I'll reset that. But what I want to do is move that very slightly, just to bring those corners up a little bit and make them a little bit lighter. I think about +3 is probably the right amount. So if we get rid of this panel, and we'll compare it with the before and after effect. So that's what we finished with, and that's what we started with. And I have to say, to my eyes at least, the finished article is definitely an improvement. Say you could use the the HDR settings that Lightroom applies. Some people are quite happy with that. Personally, I think it overdoes it sometimes. You pays your money and makes your choice, as it were. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video or found it useful, please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching. Bye for now.